Hello gamers, I'm a hardcore gamer from Ukraine and I'm here to tell you about the hilarious fails that occur in your favorite games. We'll dive into the nitty-gritty glitches and what the moments that make these games so enjoyable. And let's be honest, who doesn't love a good fail? After all, it's so fun to watch someone else make a mistake, especially when it's in a game. But don't worry, I'm not here to criticize your favorite games, on the contrary, we'll embrace the flaws and find humor in them. So sit back, relax and get ready to have a good time. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to get more gaming news. And make sure to follow me on social media to get even more gaming content. Let's get started. Let's start with PUBG. As you know, an air balloon Fulton has been added to the game as the way for players to evacuate. It's totally something you could find in real life, but for it to work, there must be a special installation on the nose of the aircraft for attaching the rope. In the game, however, there is nothing on the nose of AC-130, so the evacuation won't be successful. Interesting, right? That's why video game enthusiasts love PUBG. If someone were to be thrown into space, would their head fall off? It is also interesting as to why only the trader can move through the ventilation, even though it's a general spaceship and access to the ventilation should be available to everyone. It appears to me that holding a weapon firmly in the center of my chest is something uncomfortable. During the final battle in Doom 2, in order to defeat the Icon of Sin, you need to ascend a certain height and shoot at the correct moment to hit the head. This is a peculiar gameplay decision, considering that throughout the game the protagonist is unconcerned about the height of the enemy and will fight him until he is in front. In the final part of Doom, the Icon of Sin acts as a massive creature, yet behaves like a fool, delivering senseless pinpoint strikes instead of utilizing its enormous hands to sweep away everything in its path. Interestingly, Deadpool decided to spend the whole game budget on special effects, leaving no extra funds for further development. He then boasted that his website had 15 million views, saying that the money from them would be enough to finish the game. But 15 million views are roughly equivalent of $18,000 to $25,000, which is highly unlikely to be enough for the completion of the game. Have you ever wondered why you should pull the bolt back after each gun is drawn? And how can a fragile glass bottle bounce off the wall like an inflatable ball? What's more, it will even extinguish itself if placed in the pocket. The biggest flaw in Forest is that you can't throw away items, you can only pass them using a ridiculous tray-like system. It's so absurd that it's funny. The main flaw of BF 2042 is that it was released at all. This was so much hope for this game, including my own, but the developers messed it up again. Well done. Interestingly, Spider-Man couldn't quite prove to everyone that Mysterio had lied and tried to kill Peter, but we all remember from the first movie that the suit records everything Peter sees. So why didn't Peter show all the recordings from the suit or tell Doctor Strange to make the world forget Mysterio and all his words? Whoopsie, I got a little sidetracked there. Let's continue. It is always interesting to question the logic in video game and the world they create. In Detroit, the wastefulness of discarding damaged androids instead of repairing them is a prime example of missed opportunity. Not only it would save resources, but it would also create jobs in disassembly and repair industry. And speaking of logic, the use of high-tech and expensive androids for manual tasks is also a questionable decision. It just doesn't make sense from a cost-effectiveness standpoint. So, the next disadvantage is in Rust. Complex items always need to be crafted on a workbench. Only the simplest things, such as a bow or a spear, can be made by hand. Codlock can also be made by hand. My questions to developer is, are you serious? How can a codlock be made by hand? Come on! In official Team Fortress video, we've learned that bread mutates after teleportation. However, in the game, after teleportation with a sandwich in hand, the bread remains intact. I don't want to disappoint the engineer in his introductory video, but one engineer can set up only one turret. In Red Dead Redemption, the sheriff's failure to recognize the most dangerous criminals is a plot hole that raises question about his competence and the game's continuity. In Neighborhood, there are many vivid examples of plot holes that make the player scratch their head. For example, why does Willie scatter tapes all over the world that could just be shared? Even though there was no antagonist in the game, Willie threw a seed out the window, leaving Clement to face all the troubles caused by Clock. Furthermore, where did the Willie come from anyway? Hobo created Plasticine World, then he became lonely and created a friend named Clock, who then decided to take the crown just at the moment when Hawberk wanted to create a second friend, Clayman. Subsequently, Hawberk froze and Willy appeared, putting an end to the birth of Clay. In a nutshell, Willy is a character that appears out of nowhere and controls the entire plot. The main task in Stalker Shadow of Chernobyl is to kill the Sherlock, although we don't know this from the beginning. But after learning the backstory, we've all shocked by the scientist of C consciousness for how attentive they need to be to watch the Stalker's brain, give him a tattoo, and write in his PDA the task of killing himself without noticing that it was the same person. This annotation is further confirmed by the fact that on the mission photo, the ghost is depicted instead of the Stalker. What is worth, the brainwashing task was not performed properly, since the Stalker had no default task to kill himself. He only learned about this from his PDA. This raises the question of why bother brainwashing if you just can write it down on the PDA and forget about it. In split second, the power of a single racer to control the events of the race is almost godlike. In the end, by accumulating enough points, you can cause a massive cruiser to crash into a port, trigger a dome break, or even cause a plane crash. This is what makes the game both exciting and unreal. Friends, it's just impossible to lift a boss with just one balloon. Either the boss must be much smaller or the balloon must be much bigger. The event with Thanos in the Infinity Stones could have been more impactful if he had only been given one stone, rather than all 6. It is impossible not to notice several strange points in The Witcher. Everyone says that Witchers are a relic of the past and most monsters have been extinct. Yet Geralt of Rivia cannot travel a few hundred yards without encountering some kind of monsters. Besides, people have a negative attitude towards Witchers and almost hate them. But why? After all, Witchers are professional monster killers who protect the innocent. Why should they be hated? To get to the masquerade, you need an invitation and an original mask. And it would be nothing if all the events that have been happening weren't so strange. To begin with, Carver goes to the masquerade in a mask that is his most recognizable feature, as there are posters hanging up at every corner looking for a person in this mask. Although, it's no surprise that even the gods didn't pay attention. What's more, we were incredibly lucky that one woman accidentally lost her invitation to the masquerade. In the end, we didn't have an invitation to begin with, but we had to find a way in somehow. Once again, the gods' foolishness manifests itself in the fact that they let Corvo in, when though a female name is written on the invitation, despite the fact that Corvo looks nothing like a woman. In Battlefield 1 there are several historical inaccuracies. For example, during the Mius Ergoni offense, there were no dirigibles. The Second Battle of Cambrai began not on October 17th, but on the 8th, and it involved 324 tanks, not 500 as stated. Furthermore, the battles during the Gallipoli campaign lasted not 9 months, but 7. Everyone in Payday was angry at the gods' answers. I had 2 questions. Why couldn't the robbers take out the gods quietly, so he wouldn't scream and raise suspicious with the operator? And why, when taking the god as a hostage, did he not answer the pager under the threat of death? In the official 3rd level of the game Geometry-Sub-Zero, if you do not press the green sphere, you will fall below the level and finish it safely. Jodie has a spirit named Aiden who can do a lot of things, such as possessing people and killing them, as well as creating a force field for Jodie's protection. However, according to the plot, Aiden has forgotten his abilities and does nothing during the attacks on Jodie or battles with her. In Skyrim, the core of the gameplay revolves around exploring dungeons, where you find caches of septims at the end of each location. But the question remains, where did these septims came from? After all, ancient Nordic ruins were constructed long before the Septim Empire has founded. Miranda's action of attaching a beacon to the blade to detect the unknown coordinates of the Illusive Man's base raises the question of how she could not know the coordinates, given her high rank status and her having visited the base personally. Have you ever wondered about the police officers with dogs in Subway Surfers, who seem to be able to catch up with us even when we run to the most inaccessible places? In the 15th century, all the waterways in Venus were so polluted that one could die from poisoning by merely bathing in their water. Yet Etzel feels great. How could one survive after jumping from such a height into a small pile of leaves? In the game Sniper Elite, the law of physics are broken as bullets continue to fly straight to the target, even passing through solid objects. Don't forget to press the like button. I continue to be a guide, and we have Terraria, where there is a character that provides hints on crafting. From where does he gains his knowledge of crafting items from the subterranean world? Furthermore, in Terraria there is a renowned portal gun, which can be used anywhere, even though in the original game portals could only be placed on a specific surface. In the game Portal, the jump boots keep the player safe from falling. But what happens when the player hits a wall or a ceiling while using portals? Why is the player unharmed in these cases? Before the last mission in GTA 5, we steal an entire train using an electromagnet, but there is no helicopter capable of lifting such heavy things, let alone a whole train weighing between 90 and 200 tons. But why do I need these figures? I should pay attention to the fact that the Federal Vault is made up of several meters of concrete, not surrounded by a metal on all sides. It would have been very funny if a shot had rang out in Alex at that moment. Why did she drop the gun and she had just gotten gloves that could pull things? Attention! An outbreak of an epidemic has begun at the station. However, there is a strange fact. The bodies of the unitologists are hidden in these refrigerators, awaiting their resurrection. After all, there is an obelisk at the station that affects the bodies of the unitologists, transforming them into necromorphs. But the question is, why don't they come out of these refrigerators already resurrected as necromorphs? To be more precise, only a couple of them have come out, which is strange, considering that the epidemic began several hours ago. The same applies to the dead NPC near the obelisk. Clancy and Hoffman are playing 21 with their fingers, but it appears unfair that Clancy is playing with his left hand and Hoffman with his right. The real twist comes when Clancy dies from a lethal electric shock, and Hoffman seemingly finds his death and comes back to life only to die for real shortly thereafter. And why isn't there a single black zombie in Left 4 Dead? The main hero of Outlast goes through a lot, and sometimes manages to add interesting facts to his records, which raises even more questions. For example, after his first fall he writes that his ribs were cracked, but later it turns out that they are alright. Although Miles can be compared to the Terminator, as he fell off from a height that would send most people to the hospital for several months, he remained unscratched. In Brawl Stars, like in other low-budget games, bushes make characters completely invisible. If the main enemies are robots, all tactical moves will only work on robots, making it impossible to hunt animals stealthily or ride on a large and steep robots like Thunderjaw, even after reprogramming. The only option is to ride on Striders. In Far Cry 3 there is an excessive number of story caves, the first entrance to which is incredibly difficult, but the exit is surprisingly simple. If Jason had entered most of the caves from the other side, he would have made his task much easier. This can be seen in the case of the cave with the blue mushrooms or any of the caves containing compass pots. It's convenient, and Kratos' sword size have increased as well. In Assassin's Creed 2 there is a character named Vieri Di Pazzi, who according to the database was born when his father Francesco Di Pazzi was only 10 years old. Similarly, Roberto de Sablé from the first part is depicted as the man capable of defeating Altair, even though at the time of those events he was a 40-year-old man who died only 2 years later. In Revelation, Ezio arrives in Cappadocia on a ship, but the village is located in the center of Turkey, raising the question where the water came from. We all know that headcrabs can latch on a victim's face to control their body and turn them into a zombie. However, we have seen that this only happens to humans, not other creatures from their world. It is strange that in the Zen world we have not seen any creature with a headcrab on their head, not even the Vortigans, which would have been perfect for this scenario. In Rainbow Six there is a character named Aruni, whose ability is essentially a one-time laser barrier that can only be deactivated using a grenade. From a balance perspective, this should restrict opponents or force them to use a grenade to disarm the barrier. However, logically, any thrown object should be able to discharge the laser, even an empty magazine from a weapon. It's also strange that a damage mine can be broken with a butt strike, but not by a 1000 bullets. In Cyberpunk, there is a secret ending that can be unlocked by completing all tasks with Johnny, remaining loyal to him and not taking any pills. In this ending, we go against Arasaka alone, and somehow at the end, we end up with a fragment of Alt. However, there is no explanation for how the fragment got there, since in the other endings, the L protocol is loaded into the chip before going to Mikoshi to help separate Johnny's consciousness. In the first part of the game Five Nights at Freddy's, the energy runs out quickly, so it's unclear how one battery could power the entire pizzeria. Additionally, the Watch Dogs game shown at E3 and the actual game are almost two different games in terms of visuals. It is well known that Peter Parker is incredibly smart and experienced, but for him to be able to construct a highly advanced suit from scratch in just a few hours is even too much for him. One of the biggest problems in the Metro universe is the existence of mutants, giant, deadly monsters that couldn't have appeared in only 6 years. Look, the war began in 2013, and Artyom first rose above the ground at the age of 10, that is in 2019, and there he already saw familiar guardians. No creature could mutate and adapt to such harsh conditions in just 6 years. It would take several decades or even centuries. Slenderman is known for his ability to teleport in front of a person and kill them, but he typically chooses to torment his victims by breaking their minds before taking their lives. However, in our latest mission, we're heading straight for the tower that Slenderman can't enter, his weakness. Yes, instead of instantly attacking us or teleport to entrance, he chooses to scare us from a distance. In the game The Last of Us Part 2, one can surprisingly find a lot of ammunition, despite the fact that many years have passed since the epidemic, and cities should have been already thoroughly looted. The same applies to cars running on gasoline, since the shelf of life of gasoline is only from 1.5 to 5 years maximum, and it should have already expired, which means that you won't be able to ride on the cars. And why can't you take a parachute and jump down in BioShock Infinite? After all, this isn't the first BioShock installment with an underwater city. Everything is simpler here. In Death Stranding, I noticed that Higgs had no sense. What did Emily hire him for? After all, if he were removed from the plot, nothing would change in general. Sam would still unite the Hiral network and meet Emily. Someone posed the question, how does Mario breathe while passing the underwater level? In the helicopter, we found a map of anomalies between Zeton and Jupiter, which would have helped one safely pass all the anomalies. However, it appears that everyone had forgotten that after each emission, which regularly occurs in this area, the location of the anomalies changed. Since the helicopter crashed a long time ago, its data is likely to be outdated. A silly situation occurred when Anna fell into a pit, inhaled toxins and passed out. But why didn't she put a gas mask right after falling into the pit? Artyom, on the other hand, immediately senses something was wrong and put on a gas mask. Incidentally, Artyom, the main hero, should be blamed for staying silent for so long. That's no longer fashionable. Trevor's own vehicle seems to be much faster than they should be. First, he chased a huge jet in an ordinary irrigation plane, and then he chased another plane on a motorcycle. I have a question. What does Trevor fuel his vehicle with? The plot of Shadow Fight 2 is very strange. Before entering the world of Titans, we must close the gates of shadows and defeat 6 demons, each in their own location, on our long journey. By defeating each demon, we take their seal and move on. Finally, upon reaching our destination, we somehow find all 6 demons here. Where did they come from? Well, it doesn't matter. In any case, by defeating them, we now have to open the gates instead of closing them and defeat each demon again. But now they are scattered over hundreds of miles instead of near the gates where we just defeated them. What kind of plot-related teleports are these? Boba Fett has only one rocket in his back, but in the game he has a whole swarm of them. This may be a new ability, but what amazes me the most is the presence of these 3 Millennium Falcons. War Thunder, claiming historical accuracy for all its machines, has the same sights in most tanks in the game, which is not quite a problem, but changing the sights for some extremely unusual tanks would only plus points to the game. And if you don't play War Thunder, then it's time to start right now, because only my friends can create a new account and receive the maximum amount of bonuses. Believe me, you won't find anything like this anywhere else, so don't waste time. Click on the link in the description to start playing, and don't forget to add me as a friend to play together. Far Cry isn't Far Cry if it doesn't start with the weaponless chase after enemies. Far Cry isn't Far Cry if there are no block posts in the posts. Far Cry isn't Far Cry if there is no psychedelic scenes on the drug. Far Cry isn't Far Cry if there is no scene of burning kaya or grass. Why are such simple and standard actions such as throwing a stone or hitting a fragment only available to some survivors? It is also surprising that all survivors cannot resist the maniac. Okay, when it comes to a terrible and invincible monster. But what about the pig? According to legends, Amanda Young is hidden behind the mask, who is an ordinary girl with an average physics. Such a girl, I think, is not difficult to kill with a whole crowd if desired. It should be known that during your adventures you will come across a whole bunch of toilets filled to the brim with used syringes full of drugs. You will undoubtedly want to know where I got such a large number of syringes from. I searched all the abandoned buildings and dumps, but the answer to this question will remain my secret. The main issue with the puzzles in Fallen Order is the inclusion of a lightsaber, which should slice through anything. It's amusing when the sword fails to penetrate seemingly impenetrable wooden roots. It's minus 200 degrees outside, but our modern weapons are still functioning properly, which is surprising as they would have frozen in such low temperature. Although a weapon is a trifle, even fire burns here at minus 200 degrees. One of the most absurd fatalities in Mortal Kombat belongs to Sonya. It's unclear where the helicopter comes from, as it appears above the roofed arena, and it's also unclear how Sonya can launch an opponent into the air with just some bullets. The game binding of Isaac features the 7 deadly sins: pride, greed, lust, anger, deceit, envy, and laziness. Players of the game will understand this reference. Melman thinks walking on a safe sidewalk is too dangerous, so he opts to jump on moving cars instead. This may seem safer, but it's best not to think about it, as Melman later turns into a helicopter. As we can see, the heroes of this story were affected by the shockwave, raising 2 questions. Why weren't they pushed away, and how long will they last? Since the wave is radioactive and they should have been irradiated. I can still understand how a soldier from Tarkov can drink a whole can of condensed milk, but to drink a whole can of mayonnaise and not puke?
Really?
That's too cool. In Star Wars, the Death Star beams on Naboo no longer incinerate people, but instead lift them up like an aerodynamic tube. Additionally, the battle between Darth Maul and Obi-Wan takes place with Qui-Gon present, even though the film depicts Qui-Gon being defeated before Obi-Wan entered the battle. The most nonsensical moment in the plot of Dying Light is the destruction of Antizin. It was a foolish move, as they could have hidden the Antizin in case of disease development in Crane's body, taken the Antizin to Reyes to gain his trust, or taken the Antizin to the tower and told Reyes that no one else has it. Any of these options would have been better than the irreversible destruction of rare medicine. In the game The Dying Light 2, the players can unlock the perk that allows them to pick up and fly with an enemy without being harmed in the process. Despite being depicted as cowardly in the cutscenes of the game, Donkey in reality is a formidable fighter, even stronger than Shrek. We have all played the game Neighbors from Hell, but have never thought about where Woody got his ability to read mind, which he uses for pranks, although most pranks are related to manipulated consciousness, because the neighbor cannot fail to notice that we have swapped things around, such as a white syrup can for a red can of shaving cream. In Marvel Avengers, at the very beginning of the game, Captain America, being in the center of an explosion that particularly damaged the city, somehow survived. Yes, Captain is a super soldier, but he is not as invincible as Hulk. I was going to express my opinion on Batman's position regarding criminals, but the Peacemaker has already done it for me.
Who wrestles with murderers dressed like clowns and throws them in prison so they can break out of prison and then murder more people. Riddle me this, how many people you think Batman's indirectly murdered by being too much of a candy ass not to kill these fools who clearly need to be smoked?
The game Prince of Persia set the standard for puzzle solving with traps in third-person games, but some sometimes the traps can be too difficult, leading to question about how do they work without electricity. And the most obvious flaw of Prince of Persia is the most unrealistic wall running. The same goes for Faith in Mirror's Edge or Aiden in Dying Light 2. A simple pot in the game Plants vs Zombies is considered a full-fledged plant. But the question arises, why there is a cat among the plants? I am not the only one who has asked this question. Why can corn sometimes throw butter? Hitman invented the superpower to disappear in front of people. All you have to do is lower your head. Furthermore, Agent 47 is not at all economical. He is a master of disguise, and almost every time he embarks on a mission he changes his clothes, taking them off the person he killed, and discarding his costume each time. In the game StarCraft, Supreme Templars possess the ability to cast their shadows. And the question arises, why the shadow can pass through rows of enemies but not through buildings? The same question applies to Liberators, which can attack ground targets but not buildings. We all remember that if Remy smells delicious food, he will have a delicious dream. So the rat loves tasty food, not a problem. But what bothers me is the level with cookware. When Remy smelled the dishwashing liquid, so he had a dream about it. How is this connected with food? And sometimes dishes with leftovers are placed in very strange places, such as on the garbage dump, where there is always a whole plate of fruits there. Thank you for your watching, and a special thank to those who liked it. Subscribe to the channel and other social networks. I left the links in the description. And also write which games to make a review of.